thing about Boston in late October is that the cold gets into your shoes before you even notice. I was standing on my older brother's porch in Newton, watching my breath fog up the porch light, and I remember thinking very specifically that I should have worn the boots, not the heels. The heels were a mistake. Everything about being there was a mistake, but the heels were the mistake I could feel. I rang the bell. Nobody answered for a long time, which was strange because I could hear at least 20 people inside. Then the door swung open, and my sister-in-law Megan was standing there in an apron, holding a wooden spoon, and her face did this thing where she tried to look surprised and pleased at the same time, and only managed to look like she'd been caught doing something. "Oh," she said, "you actually came." I held up the bottle of wine I'd brought. It was a 2015 Brunello, $340 at the shop on Newbury, and I'd grabbed it without thinking because I was running late and the bottle was just sitting there on my counter from a client dinner. I said I would. Right. Well, come in. Take your shoes off, the rug is new. I stepped inside and crouched down to undo the strap on my heels, and that's when my mother came around the corner from the kitchen and saw me. She didn't say hello. She put her hand on my shoulder, leaned down, and said in this stage whisper that everyone in the foyer could hear, "Sweetheart, listen. Don't bring up the work thing tonight. It's Hannah's night. We don't need to make it sad." I looked up at her, one shoe off, one shoe on, my coat half unbuttoned. The work thing. You know what I mean. Just let it be a happy evening. I'm 32 years old. I have an MBA from Wharton. 8 months earlier, I'd closed the acquisition that took my firm from a regional player to a name people in Manhattan returned phone calls about. 3 weeks before that party, the board had unanimously voted me in as chief executive of the merged entity, which we'd renamed Halverson Price Capital. I was the youngest CEO of any registered investment advisor in the Northeast, managing over $5 billion in assets. I had not told my family, any of them. My mother thought I'd been laid off. I should explain. The merger had eaten me alive for most of the year. I'd been on planes constantly, sleeping in hotels in Charlotte and Chicago, and once for a horrible 11 days in a Hyatt in suburban Connecticut. I'd missed my niece's 3rd birthday. I'd missed Easter. I'd sent maybe 4 texts to the family group chat, all of them some version of crazy at work, talk soon, love you. My family interpreted 4 months of crazy at work as a cover-up. They decided, collectively and without ever asking me directly, that I'd been let go and was too embarrassed to admit it. I found this out in the foyer. With one shoe on. "Mom," I said carefully, "I haven't been laid off." She made a face. The face was sympathetic and patient, and absolutely did not believe a word of it. "Of course not, honey. Now come on, Hannah's been asking for you." She walked away. I stood there in my one shoe for another second, processing. Then I took off the other shoe and walked into my brother's living room with the bottle of Brunello and a smile I had to physically construct on my face. Hannah was my younger cousin, 26, my Aunt Carrie's daughter. She'd just gotten engaged to a man named Tate Birdquist. The party was technically a casual family welcome for him. The whole extended Newton Wellesley contingent was there. My Uncle Phil and his second wife, my cousin Doug, who sells commercial insurance, my brother Will and Megan, their 2 kids running between everyone's legs. Hannah was on the couch with Tate's hand on her thigh, holding court about the wedding venue they were considering, somewhere on the Cape that booked out 3 years in advance. Tate was 28. He had that haircut that cost $90 and looks like it cost nothing. He was wearing a navy quarter zip, a Patek on his wrist that I clocked immediately as a fake because the subdial alignment was a millimeter off and the real ones aren't, and he was leaning back on the couch with the expansive body language of a man who was very, very sure of himself. Hannah saw me and shrieked, "Oh my God, you came! Tate, this is the cousin I told you about, the one in finance." Tate looked up and assessed me in a way I recognized. It was the look men give when they're trying to figure out if you're a threat or a punchline and have already decided you're the punchline. "Hey," he said. "Hannah's mentioned you. Sorry to hear about everything." "Everything," I said. "You know, the job thing. It's brutal out there right now. But hey, finance is cyclical, right? It'll come back." I just looked at him for a second. Then I said, "Right." My Aunt Carrie pressed a glass of white wine into my hand. "Come sit, honey, come sit. We want to hear about what you've been up to." Or, whatever you want to talk about. I sat in the armchair, the lumpy one nobody sits in. Hannah was talking to Megan about the florist. Tate was holding forth to my Uncle Phil about, of all things, the future of asset management. The whole industry is dead, Tate was saying. It's all algos now. The legacy firms? They're gonna get dismantled in the next 5 years. The boomers running them have no idea what's coming. It's a bloodbath. Phil nodded along the way uncles do. I sipped the wine, which was bad, and watched Tate work the room. "Where do you work, Tate?" I asked. "Sterling Marsh," he said. "I'm an associate on the analytics desk. But honestly, I'm not staying. I've got a final round on Monday morning at Halverson Price." I did not move. I did not move. I felt the wine glass go cool in my hand because I'd stopped breathing for a second, and my temperature regulation had a tiny seizure. "Halverson Price?" I repeated. "Yeah, you've probably heard of them. Or maybe not, and you're end of the industry. They're elite. Brand new firm, just merged, run by some shark CEO who's apparently going to clean house. They're hiring a small team of senior associates to run a new vertical. I'm a finalist. Out of like hundreds." "Wow," I said. "Monday, 9 a.m. They're flying the executive team in to meet me. Apparently they don't bring out the leadership for just anyone." He smiled, and the smile was for me, specifically. He wanted me to feel small. He had been briefed, by Hannah or Aunt Carrie or my mother, that I was the failed cousin, and he was going to use his Monday interview as a cudgel. I took a slow sip of the bad wine. "What's the role?" I asked. "Senior associate, structured products. Direct report to the head of the vertical. Big book of business already in the queue." "That sounds great, Tate. Really. Good luck." "Thanks, I'm great, Tate. Really. Good luck." "Thanks, I don't really need it. When you have the talent, the rest takes care of itself." I had personally interviewed and rejected the previous 2 finalists for that role. I had a calendar reminder on my phone, the same phone in my purse 2 feet from him, that said 9 a.m. Monday Bergquist final. Conference Room A. Tate Bergquist was about to walk into a final round to meet a CEO he had not yet realized was sitting in his fiancé's family room drinking a $6 Pinot Grigio. He had no idea. The rest of dinner was bad. My mother kept loading my plate with extra food, telling me I needed to eat. That stress was the silent killer. Aunt Carrie told the whole table about a friend of hers whose son had been out of work for almost 2 years before he found something at a CVS distribution center, and how it just goes to show. Hannah toasted Tate's incredible career trajectory. Tate, flushed and expansive on a 3rd glass of wine, said things like, "You know, the real problem with finance is the dead weight. 40-year-old MDs collecting a check while my generation does the actual work." My mother said, "You're so right, Tate. It's so refreshing to hear someone speak the truth." He looked at me. "You probably saw it coming, didn't you? That's why they cut you." They knew the new wave was coming. I took another small bite. I said nothing. "Don't worry though," he said. "I've already told Hannah if my Halverson thing works out, I'll see if I can get you something. Maybe in operations, something steady." My Aunt Carrie actually clapped her hands together. I stood up. I said, "Excuse me for a second," and walked to the powder room, and I locked the door behind me and put my hands flat on the marble counter and looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. I didn't cry. I wasn't going to cry. The thing nobody understands about being underestimated is that after the 3rd or 4th round of it, the hurt stops being the dominant emotion. What replaces it is a kind of cold, surgical clarity. I left the bathroom. I went back to the couch. I made small talk for 40 more minutes. I hugged my mother goodbye. I told Hannah congratulations one more time. And on the drive back to my apartment in the seaport, I called my chief of staff and told her I needed every page of Tate Bergquist's file on my desk by 7 the next morning. By 7 the next morning, I had the file. By 8, I had questions. By 10, I had answers, and the answers were worse than I'd expected. Tate Bergquist's CV said he had a degree in financial engineering from Carnegie Mellon. He did not. He had a degree in economics from a school I will not name because he barely graduated and they don't deserve to be associated with him further. He had listed 3 certifications, including 2 CFA levels, that he had not actually completed. He had registered for the level 2 exam twice and not shown up either time. His associate role at Sterling Marsh was technically a contractor position. He'd been there 14 months. Before that, he had worked at a regional shop in Hartford. The CV said he'd left to pursue a more strategic role, HR records, which my head of HR pulled through perfectly legitimate professional channels because Hartford is a small town in the industry, told a different story. He'd been escorted from the building after a compliance review found he'd been falsifying client meeting logs to inflate his bonus. He had not been prosecuted because the firm wanted to avoid a public mess. He had signed an NDA in exchange for a quiet exit. The technical assessment he'd submitted in our process was, on close rereading, a Frankenstein of plausible-sounding nonsense. He'd used the word stochastic 4 times incorrectly. The volatility model he proposed for one of the case questions would have lost the firm meaningful money in 3 different historical regimes I could name off the top of my head. The HR analyst who'd advanced him had done so because he interviewed well and because she was 26 and easily charmed. I made a mental note to have a kind conversation with her about screening rigor. By Sunday night, I had a binder. A real, physical, 3-ring binder. Because I am 32 and old enough to know that paper across a table lands harder than a screen. My phone rang at 9 on Sunday. It was Aunt Carrie. "Sweetheart," she said. "I just wanted to check on you after Saturday. You seemed quiet." "I'm fine, Aunt Carrie. Tate is just so worried about you. He told me last night he wants to help. He thinks maybe if his interview works out, he could put in a word for you. For something administrative, just to get you back on your feet." I was looking at the binder when she said this. There's a particular kind of laughter that sits in your chest, and you have to physically swallow to keep down. I swallowed it. "That's so generous of him," I said. "He's a wonderful man, honey. Hannah is so lucky." It meant, "Carrie, I have to go. I have a big morning tomorrow." "Oh? An interview?" "Something like that. I'll say a prayer. Thanks." I hung up. "I'll say a prayer. Thanks." I hung up. I poured myself 2 fingers of bourbon and went to bed. Monday morning, the conference room on the 31st floor was set up the way I'd asked. 3 chairs on one side of the long walnut table. 1 chair on the other side, facing the window so the morning sun would be in the candidate's eyes. I sat in the middle. To my left, my chief operating officer, a man named Rashid who I'd worked with for 9 years and who had a very dry sense of humor I was about to put to use. To my right, my head of HR, Janelle, with a folder. At 8:58, my assistant called through. "Mr. Bergquist is checked in at reception. Send him up." The elevator dinged. I heard footsteps on the marble in the foyer. Confident, the kind of clip a man makes when he's already mentally drafting the press release about himself. The conference room door opened. Tate stepped in, hand already extended, smile already on. "Good morning, I'm Tate Bergquist, really excited to finna." He saw me. I have in my career watched several grown men have small physical crises. I have seen a CFO faint during an earnings call. I have seen a lawyer vomit into a Starbucks cup during a deposition. None of those compared to watching Tate Bergquist register, in real time, that the cousin he had been mocking 40 hours earlier was sitting at the head of the table in a conference room on the 31st floor, wearing a charcoal Brunello Cucinelli suit. His face went the color of skim milk. His hand was still out, hanging in the air, which somehow made the whole thing worse. His mouth opened. No sound came out. "Mr. Bergquist," I said, "please, sit." He sat. He sort of fell, actually. Into the chair facing the window. "This is Rashid Patel, actually." Into the chair facing the window. "This is Rashid Patel, our Chief Operating Officer. This is Janelle Okafor, our Head of Human Resources. I'm Vivian Halpern. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Halverson Price Capital. Thank you for coming in. He stopped. Let's begin. Janelle, the file." Janelle slid the binder across the table. "Mr. Minjel, Bergquist, we always like to start with a brief technical conversation. Just to confirm what we saw in your written assessment, you proposed a mean reversion strategy on page 4 with the look-back window of 20 trading days. Can you walk me through how that performs in a regime shift, say, late February of 2020? Tate looked at the page. He blinked at it. It would adjust. The model is dynamic. Dynamic how? It rebalances. On what trigger? On a A volatility threshold. Specified where in your code? He looked at the page. The page did not specify it anywhere. I'd have to pull up the full notebook. Of course, we have it. Page 11 of the binder. There's no threshold in your code, Mr. Bergquist. Your model would have lost 41% of capital in March of 2020. Did you know that? I think there's a misunderstanding. Let's move on. Carnegie Mellon Financial Engineering, class of 2018. Yes. Who taught the stochastic calculus core? He stared at me. It's a small program, Mr. Bergquist. 83 students that year. The professor would have been Dr. Suresh Krishnan. He's a friend of mine. I called him this morning. He has no recollection of you, and the registrar has no record of you. And the registrar has no record of you. Would you like to revise that part of your CV for me? His mouth was open. Nothing came out. Sterling Marsh. Associate Structured Products. Janelle, what does the engagement letter say? Janelle didn't even look at the binder. Independent contractor, 6-month renewable, currently in his 3rd renewal. Not eligible for benefits or bonus. Terminable at will. Not an associate then. No. And the previous role? Cross Anchor Capital, Hartford. Why did you leave? He'd had nothing for the last 3 minutes. Now he had less than nothing. He had a slow, draining faucet look on his face, like he could feel every drop of his story going down. I don't think this is appropriate. You signed a non-disclosure with them, Mr. Bergquist. You did not sign a non-disclosure with us. Cross Anchor escorted you out for falsifying internal records. Compliance file dated March 11, 2023. Do you want me to read the bullet points, or do you want to summarize them yourself? This is harassment. It's an interview, Mr. Bergquist. You're failing it. He stood up. His chair made a noise against the floor. I'm going to leave. That is your right. Before you do, I want to be clear about one thing. You walked into this firm with a fraudulent CV. You sat across from junior people in our process and lied to them. That is, in itself, a fireable offense. And if you were our employee, you would be fired. Since you are not, you are simply not getting the job. You are not going to apply to any of our subsidiaries. You are not going to mention Halverson Price on your CV, your LinkedIn, or in any conversation. If we find that you have, our general counsel will be in touch. And I want you to understand what that means in this industry. Do you understand? He was nodding. He was nodding before I'd finished the sentence. Janelle will see you out. He walked to the door. At the door, he turned around. His face did something I will remember for a long time. It went through 3 emotions in 2 seconds. Panic. Then anger. Then a kind of pleading. Vivian. Please. Hannah. Mr. Bergquist. Please. The interview is over. He left. The door clicked shut behind him. Rashid let out a slow breath. Well, that was thorough. I drove home that night to 17 voicemails. I did not listen to them. I drank a glass of water, ate a piece of toast, and was in bed by 9. The next 2 weeks were a war in slow motion. Hannah called 14 times. My mother called 8. Aunt Carrie sent a text message that was so long it arrived in 3 separate bubbles and accused me of, among other things, sabotaging the family, being jealous of Hannah's happiness, being always like this, and ruining a young man's career out of bitterness about my own failed life. I called Hannah back exactly once. She was crying when she picked up. She said Tate had told her I'd ambushed him, that I'd used my old contacts to plant fake stories about him, that I was a bitter, washed-up administrator who couldn't stand to see him win. I let her finish. Then I said, very quietly, Hannah, I'm the CEO of the firm he interviewed at. I conducted the interview personally. He was not ambushed. He was caught. His CV is fabricated. I can prove every single line of it. There was a long silence. Mom said you got laid off. Mom assumed I got laid off. Mom assumed I got laid off. I never said that. I've been busy. There is a difference. You're the CEO. Yes. You run the firm? Yes. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said in a small voice, send me everything. I sent her a redacted version of the binder. I removed the legally privileged parts. I left in the register confirmation, the public record of his degree, the dates that didn't match, the certifications he didn't have. It was 23 pages. I did not hear from her for 12 days. Then, on a Saturday morning, I got an envelope in the mail. It was an engagement party invitation. Cream cardstock. Embossed gold. The party was the following weekend, downtown, at a steakhouse in the Back Bay that takes itself very seriously. There was a handwritten note from my mother on the back. "Vivian, please come. We are putting this behind us. Hannah wants the family there." So she'd chosen him? Or she'd been pressured into choosing him? Or my mother had decided that the family fiction was more important than the family truth? Either way, the message was clear. The invitation was a stage. They were going to publicly absorb Tate into the family, and my presence was meant to be the period at the end of the sentence. The chastened cousin, smiling through her humiliation, accepting the new order. I RSVP'd, yes. The Saturday of the party, I did not dress like someone arriving to apologize. I wore a black wool dress I'd had made in Milan, low heels because the floor at that restaurant is uneven, and a single piece of jewelry, a thin gold chain my grandmother had left me. I walked into the private dining room at 7:15. The room had been done up with eucalyptus and white candles. About 30 people were there. Tate was at the head of the table next to Hannah. When he saw me, his face did a tiny twitch and then resolved into a smile I did not like. He had decided, in the intervening weeks, that he had survived. That he told his version of events first, and won. That I was here to surrender. "Vivian," my mother said, rushing over. "I'm so glad you came. We're all so glad." "Of course, Mom." I was given a glass of champagne. I made small talk with my Uncle Phil's wife about a renovation. I watched Tate work the room. He did not look at me directly, but he was performing for me, the same way he had at Newton, telling loud stories about the toxic culture at Halverson Price, how he'd dodged a bullet, how the firm was about to be ripped apart by regulators. He told one story about the CEO being a piece of work, who, he'd heard, was on her way out. After the entrees, my Aunt Carrie stood and tapped her glass. "To Hannah and Tate. Two of the kindest, brightest young people we know. Tate, we are so blessed to be welcoming you into this family." Glasses up. Glasses down. Tate stood. "Thank you, Carrie. Thank you all. The last few weeks have been hard. Some of you know I was the target of a pretty ugly campaign by someone who, frankly, should have known better." His eyes flicked, just for a second, to me. "But I want to share some good news. As of Monday, I'll be starting as a director at Pemberton and Vance. Big promotion. Bigger title. Sometimes the universe rewards integrity." There was a soft round of applause. Hannah looked up at him with shining eyes. I stood up. The room went quiet the way a room goes quiet when nobody quite knows what's happening. "I'd like to add a toast, if I may." "Vivian," my mother started. "It'll just take a minute, Mom." I picked up my water glass. I did not look at Tate. I looked at Hannah. "To honesty," I said. "Tate, congratulations on the new role at Pemberton and Vance. They're a great firm. They're also one of our largest distribution partners. The CEO over there, Doug Whitaker, is a personal friend. We had lunch on Wednesday." Tate's face was already starting to go. "After last week, when it became clear that there was a young man in our family who was going to need stable employment and structured supervision, I called Doug. I asked if he could find a place for someone with, let's say, a creative relationship with his own resume. Doug was wonderful about it. "They've created a role for you, Tate. Director of Strategic Partnerships, External Outreach. You'll have an office. You'll have a title. You will not have a team. You will not have access to client funds. You will not have signing authority on anything larger than office supplies. You will report to a woman named Priya Krishnamurthy, who reports to my head of platform relationships. You will receive a weekly performance summary that comes to my desk. Your salary, which I believe is $190,000, comes out of a marketing budget line item that my CFO and I review every quarter." The room was completely silent. "I did not do this to hurt you, Tate. I did this because you are about to marry my cousin, and I would rather have you employed and watched than unemployed and bitter. I am giving you a job because Hannah loves you. I am giving you a leash because I love her. If you are kind to her, if you are honest with her, If you show up to your office at 9 and leave at 5 and behave like a person, you will keep this job for as long as you want it. If you ever lie on a document again, if you ever speak about Hannah or this family the way you spoke about me 3 weeks ago, if you ever try to use this position to claim something you have not earned, the role disappears, your reputation in this industry disappears, and we will have a much less pleasant conversation about the documents you submitted to my firm. Do you understand? He was nodding. He was just nodding. I turned to Hannah. Hannah, I am sorry to do this here. I tried to give you the information privately. You deserve to know the whole truth in one place, with witnesses, so that nobody gets to rewrite this later. He lied about his degree. He lied about his certifications. He was fired for fraud from a job in Hartford in 2023. He came to my firm with a fabricated resume and tried to use the interview as a way to humiliate me in front of you. Whatever you decide to do is your decision. I will support it. But you are deciding with the truth on the table? Hannah was looking at Tate. She was not crying yet. She was just looking at him and he was not meeting her eye. She reached down. She slid the ring off her finger. She set it, very gently, next to his bread plate. She did not say anything. She picked up her purse, walked around the table, and took my hand. Can I leave with you? Yes, to everyone else I said, looking around the room. I apologize for the disturbance. Please, enjoy the rest of dinner. Mom, I'll call you tomorrow. We walked out together. The click of our heels on the marble was the only sound in the room. Hannah cried in the car. Not loudly. Just a steady, exhausted leak of tears all the way back to my building. She came up. I made her tea. She slept in my guest room for a week and a half. We talked, really talked, for the first time in maybe a decade. She told me she had known something was off about him. She'd ignored it because he was charming, because he was the first man who'd called her important, because Ann Carey adored him. She told me she'd been scared of the wedding. She told me she'd thought she could leave. I told her about the merger. I told her about the CEO offer. I told her about the 8 months of planes and hotels and the niece's birthday I'd missed, and she cried again about that one. My mother called 11 days after the dinner. I let it go to voicemail twice. The third time I picked up. Vivian, she said. Hi, Mom. I owe you an apology. I waited. I assumed something I shouldn't have. I told everyone something I shouldn't have. Ann Carey and we got it very wrong. You did. I'm proud of you. I should have said it a long time ago. Thank you for saying it now. It wasn't a movie ending. We did not hug it out. There was a coolness for a while, on my side, that took months to thaw. But it thawed. Aunt Carrie sent a long email about a year later, in which she did not quite apologize but came close enough that I let it count. Hannah moved in with me for 3 months, then got her own place in the South End. She'd been working in marketing at a mid-sized firm. 6 months after the dinner, she joined our internal communications team. She is very good at it. She has a sharpness I had not seen in her before, which I think had been there all along. Tate showed up at Pemberton and Vance the Monday after the dinner. Doug tells me he is a model employee. Quiet. Punctual. He runs a mentorship program for recent college graduates and writes a quarterly newsletter that nobody reads. He is, by all accounts, well paid and miserable, which is a combination I find I can live with. The thing nobody tells you about being underestimated by your own family is that the moment you stop performing for their approval is the moment you become unrecognizable to them, and the moment you become unrecognizable to them, and the moment you become unrecognizable is the moment they have to either see you or lose you. Some of mine chose to see me. Some of mine I had to lose, at least for a while. I did not get the family I had imagined when I was a kid. I got a smaller, truer one, and on most days that turns out to be enough. I still have the bottle of Brunello. I never opened it that night. It's in the rack in my kitchen. I think one day I'll open it for Hannah when she's ready, and we'll drink it together and not talk about any of this, and that will be the end of it. I think about that night in Newton more often than I'd like to admit. Not the conference room. Not even the steakhouse. The foyer. One shoe on. One shoe off. My mother leaning down to tell me not to embarrass anyone with my work thing. That image is what stays with me, because that was the moment everything in my life had been quietly building toward, and I almost missed it. What I learned, slowly and at real cost, is that families don't always see you. They see the version of you that fits the story they've already decided to tell. My family had cast me as the cautionary tale long before Tate Bergquist ever sat down at that dinner table. He didn't create the script. He just read it back to me, louder than the rest, and that's why it cut. The pity in my mother's voice was already there. Aunt Carrie's poor Vivian smile had been waiting in a drawer for months. Tate just gave them permission to take it out and use it. The hard truth is that I let it happen. For 4 months I sent 4-word texts and assumed my work would speak for itself. It didn't. Silence does not protect you. Silence gives other people a blank page to write your story on, and they will fill it with whatever makes them most comfortable. I learned that the price of privacy, when you're surrounded by people who are looking for reasons to feel sorry for you, is a kind of slow erasure. I won't pay that price again. I also learned that there is a difference between revenge and accountability. And that line matters. I could have ended Tate's career in a single afternoon. I had the documents. I had the contacts. The industry would have closed around him so fast, he wouldn't have had time to delete his LinkedIn. I chose not to do that. Not because he deserved kindness, but because Hannah deserved a cousin who wouldn't burn down her life to make a point. Restraint is not weakness. Restraint is what separates a person who has power from a person who is using power. I wanted to be the first kind. And the deepest thing, the one I am still working on, is that I had to be willing to be unrecognizable. The version of me my family had agreed on was small and apologetic and grateful for scraps. The actual version of me was not. When I let those two finally meet, in a private dining room over a table of half-eaten steaks, I lost some people. My aunt didn't speak to me for almost a year. A few cousins still won't. That is the cost of standing fully inside your own life, and it is a real cost, and I will not pretend otherwise. But what I got back was a relationship with Hannah that is honest, a relationship with my mother that is finally adult, and a relationship with myself I had been postponing for a decade. Build the work. Tell the truth. Hold the line. The people who stay are the family you actually have.